in this video, we're going to be talking about two different appraisal methods and how we have to do the calculations. We're going to talk about comparative with the comparison method, and we're going to be talking about the cost method. So two methods that we're going to discuss in this specific chapter, in this video, and we're going to be doing some math. Now, this should be exciting. It's not scary. This is an easy questions on the exams. Honestly, the easiest ones you can have. So we want to have, most of our students, when they come back from the exam, they say, oh, I wish I had more of this, right? Because they are so straightforward and there's nothing that you have to worry about. So be excited about this chapter, be excited about this video, and I promise you're going to love it. Okay, so we're going to start with the first method. So we're going to talk about comparative or the comparison method, and then we're going to do the cost. Cost is the properties that have, they are unique, right? And there's nothing to compare it to. Comparative method, what do we use this method for? This is the method is the most commonly used method. So if I ask you out of all of the methods, which one we use the most as in the appraisal work, it's definitely the comparative method or the comparison. Why do we use this one the most? Because it has enough comparables, that recently sold ones, that you can use and compare it to your property. There's enough similar properties, basically, right, that we can use. So we use it for two purposes. We use it for all of the residential properties, right? Could be condominiums, strata buildings, detached houses, right? And we also use it for the lots. On the exam, if they ask you, out of all of the methods, which one do you use for just an empty lots, for just bare lands, strata lots? Then you say it's still the comparative method, okay? Why? Because we still have enough information. We have enough recently sold land that we can compare them to the subject property that we're trying to sell. So it's based on the theory of the substitution. I already explained that in the previous video, but what does that mean? This is what the math is going to be based on, because if my subject property, the house I'm trying to sell, has only 2 bedrooms, and the comparables that I find has 1 3-bedroom, one is 1 bedroom, they have different square footages, then I have to do the substitution. So that means I have to, it says, based on the theory of the substitution of the similar properties which have been recently sold. So that means I'm going to find the one that recently sold ones, and they have to be similar to mine, and then I will do that substitution between the bedrooms and the bathrooms and the square footages, and I will find out how much my property is worth. Okay, that's where those math questions come from, because we'll have to do those adjustments. So substitution, that is similar properties. Now, what's similar for the exam? Sometimes they will ask you for that definition by itself and say, what is similar? In respect to what? Who decides what's similar? Is that a real estate agent who decides what's similar? Is that an appraiser who decides what's similar? It's not your opinions. Who decides what's similar is your buyers and sellers. So those two parties are the one who decides what's similar or not. So for the example, they ask you what's similar with respect to factors judged by the buyers and the sellers. Okay? It's their influence. They're the one who decides what's similar. Okay? Which have recently been sold. So what do you compare properties to that recently sold? A lot of you guys will have a question on recent. And they will ask you, so what is recent? Is that 1 day? Is that 1 week? 1 month? Is that 1 year? Right? Can they put a number on recent? Can they tell you, oh, it has to be this time, or it has to be this time? If you see they start putting numbers on recent, oh, it has to be 2 properties sold in that period, or it has to be 30 days from the day of the sale, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the number they try to put on a recent, that's how you know it becomes a false statement. It's not a true statement, because recent is when the market conditions have remained stable. When the market's been stable, that's how far back you can go, and this is how far back you can find those recently sold properties and use them as a comparable for yours. You get the point in here. So recent, nobody can put a number on the recent. Nobody can tell you how long is recent is, right? Otherwise, that becomes a false statement. So recent is when the market condition have remained stable. So it's when everything is stable on the market, that's how far you can go. Of course, you use the arm's length transaction. I'm going to repeat myself over and over. If I meet my mom, and if I come and see her, I'm not going to shake my hand, because we don't have this. This is for business relationship. So whatever we deal with, it has to be the arm's length transaction. Your family don't come on the arm's length transaction. We don't deal with your family related parties. If you try to see that the sale happened, so if I look at one of the comparables and I see it sold for way less, and I call that agent and I say, so what happened? How come you guys sold it for so much less? And he says, oh, that was not the arm's length transaction. That was between the mother and the son sale. Do you see the point? Can I use that as a comparable? No, I cannot, because it's not the arm's length transaction. So I would just get rid of that particular comparable, and I'm not going to include it, and I'll use the other ones as a comparable to my subject property, right? So that's what they're referring to. Okay, so one more to ask you. So the price index, so an example, we'll call it the consumer price index, or they can call it the shelter price index, doesn't really matter. But you've seen this, right? This is like how much consumption do you have, right? As a consumer, the food, the housing, the whatever that is you're using, the transportation stuff. As an appraiser, would I include that into my market appraisals, or would I use that to appraise the property? Or you as a real estate agent, would you use the consumer price index as a comparable? No, that's not us. It cannot be used to adjust the sale prices under no circumstances. So we don't use the how much people buy, how much they sell on the other stuff, like I'm talking about the clothing and the medical and the food and everything else. That's what they're referring to by the price index, right? Irrelevant to the appraisal to one specific property. So we don't use that. So just know if they give you a question, when you do practice question, you'll see one of them there. And it talks about price index will be used, never, right? So just for example, say there's no under no circumstances you'll be using the price index. Okay, question 1. The comparative method of appraisal is based on an analysis of recent sale prices for similar properties. Which of the following best describes the word recent? So they're referring to the recent. Let's look at those options, and you tell me which one you can definitely remove. You know it's definitely a false statement. Option 1, a period of time immediately after the appraisal date during which the market values of the surrounding areas have not risen. So they say immediately after the appraisal date. So that's what they're referring to recent, when nothing has been changed. Okay? Not sure? Let's skip it. Option 2, a period of time immediately preceding the appraisal date or not less than 1 week and no more than 6 months. Now, definitely this one is a false statement because they can never put a time limit on things. Okay, this one is out. Option 3, the period of time immediately after the appraisal date during which 4 properties have been sold in the subject property neighborhood. Doesn't matter if it's 4 or 1 or if it's... So they cannot put numbers on reasons. So for that reason, option 2 and option 3 is definitely out. Okay. How about option number 4? A period of time immediately preceding the appraisal date during which property values in region have remained stable. Okay, so now we have to look and see what are they talking about. Here they talk about the same thing. So they all have immediately after appraisal date, and then they say market values of the surrounding areas have not risen. So the market value has not been risen. And the last one says during which property values in the region have remained stable. So what are we looking for? Is that the values, or is that about the stability in here? It's when the market have remained stable, right? It's not about the market value and it's not about the market rates. So an example will say, how about the interest rate went up or the interest rate have remained stable? You see, it's not about the interest rate. It's not about the market value. It's about the property values itself, right? When the market have remained stable and they haven't been changed, that's what they're looking for. But that is a tricky one, okay? Question 2. Which of the following statements regarding the comparative method of appraisal is true statement? So they're looking for true, okay? Now, this is a tricky question, so we're going to go one by one. I'm going to eliminate things. The comparative method of appraisal should be used in the property which possesses latent value. Which method do we use for the latent value property? Okay, it's not a comparative, that is a residual method. Go back if you have to, right? Notes from the previous chapter. Okay, so it's latent value, that is not at its highest and best use. And if it's not at highest and best use, we don't compare it to the other properties. We try to redevelop that. So option 1 is definitely not comparative method. Option 2, to apply the comparative method of appraisal, the appraiser estimates the market value of the subject property using as evidence the sale prices of similar properties which were sold at any time prior to the appraisal. Tricky, right? So he's using that as similar property which were sold at any time. So that, can I go back 20 years back? Because that's any time. You got the point, highlight that. Let's go for the next one. The comparative method of appraisal is the most inexact approach. And I'll stop. Which one is the most inexact approach? Is that a comparative method or is that the cost method? Hopefully it's at the cost. Cost is the one that the church, I don't know how much it's going to sell for, so that's the most inexact approach because you're just looking at the cost of the land and the building and you're trying to estimate the value based on that. But this is the most exact method. So comparative method is the most exact. So for that reason, option 3 is definitely out because it's the most exact method. That's the most usable method. All right. Option 4, the comparative method reflects market behavior and requires a minimum of subjective opinion from the appraiser. That was in the previous chapter. And my question was, do you have to hire the appraiser when it comes to comparative method, or can you do appraisal yourself? Can you do it yourself? You don't get paid for that, but can you do this? Of course you can. So when I see it requires a minimum of subjective opinion from the appraiser, that means you don't need to hire the appraiser. That becomes a true statement. Option 2, the problem was at any time. Hopefully you highlight that part because you can't just go back 20 years back. That's a bit too long, right? If I say within reasonable time, then that would be a true statement too, okay? But in this case, yes, requires a minimum of subjective opinion from the appraiser. You don't need to know appraiser's information at this point because you can do it by yourself. Comparative method, you have enough data, you have enough information to come up with your own decision here. Question 3. An appraiser is using a market data approach for his appraisal of the single-family house by proper adjustment. The appraiser can use sales prices of all of the following properties for the comparison purposes except one. So they're asking you in English, as an appraiser, he can use pretty much everything except one thing, what he can never use to determine the property value. Okay, houses in different neighborhoods, houses with the different square footages, okay, houses recently sold between the related parties, and the houses sold over 6 months ago. I'm not talking about recent, so you can use that as long as the market has been stable, that's okay, okay? I'm not looking for recent definition here. I'm saying what you can use. And some people says, can I use houses from different neighborhoods? If you have nothing in this one, go ahead. But there's one thing has to jump at you. What you can never use. Remember this? If that was my mother, and if I sold a house to her, that's related parties. So you can never ever use related party sales. So if I find a house that sold for way less, and I called him and I asked him, why did you sell for lower than most of the other houses go for? And he says, oh, that was between related parties. That was a mother and son transaction. Then I cannot use that as comparable. Everything else I can use. Good job. Question 4. In the comparative method of appraisal, is most important that the subject building and the comparable buildings be what? Okay, so whatever you compare them, subject building is the one that you're trying to find a price for. Comparables is the one that recently sold ones. Similar with respect to factors that have a major influence on buyers and sellers. Remember what similar stands for? Right? Who decides what similar? Buyers and sellers. So option 1 is really good. Free from any mortgages. No, it doesn't have to be. You can sell a house with mortgage and then just pay it off later. At the same general architecture style, it doesn't have to be. It could be different styles. Okay? Constructed by either average or above average workmanship. So they're definitely looking for similar. Because as I said, sometimes they'll ask you for that definition, and this question, they kind of combine it with the other question, right? As long as you see similar buyers and sellers, then that's the answer they're looking for. So now, are you guys ready? We're going to do a little bit of math on the comparative method. Now, there's no need for you to pick up the calculators, to be honest. This is not a real math, but you just have to know how to adjust, right? So basically, in real life, do we use this? not really. We have computers for everything, right? But you kind of have to, if I look at the picture, and this is how we do in real life too, right? And I say, okay, this is my subject property. That's the one I'm trying to figure out the price. And if I look at that, there's one comparable that has 3 bedrooms, the other comparable has 5 bedrooms. This one sold for 500, that one sold for 600. You know how much you will sell the subject property for, right? You will say it's probably worth 550, right? You will go in between. So that's exactly what we do in real life. But for the exam, they want you to ask what would happen to the prices, okay? So first, you need to know what rating grid is. Rating grid, and it's a fancy word, but it stands for your subject property. That is the basis of your comparable, I guess, it's the basis basically, and everything else will be adjusted to it. So basically, if I want to know how much my comparable is worth, how much my subject is worth, I will take each of the comparable and compare it to the subject. Take each comparable, compare it to the subject. I will not compare comparable between each other, okay? But I will compare them to the subjects. So my subject property is the basis, and the comparable will be adjusted to the subject. Okay? That's what the rating grid is about. We're going to be using that IS formula. The AS formula. We have a lot of good formulas, right? So inferior you add, superior you subtract. I'll show you how that works. You don't have to worry about this one too much, right? But inferior, in this picture, this property is inferior, right? It has only 3 bedrooms, right? Compared to my subject property, it has less, okay? So if I want to know how much my subject property is worth, I will be playing with the price of the comparable. I'll say it again. If I need to know how much my subject property is worth, I'm going to be playing with the price of this. Why? Because it is a subjective value. It's already been sold. I know how much it was sold for. And in order for me to know how much my property is going to be worth for, I will be adjusting this price on a piece of paper. So I'll be playing with the comparable. So if my comparable is inferior, it has less. That's what inferior stands for. Then the formula is IA, right? I add. So inferior, that means I would add to this. So my subject will be worth more than 500,000, right? The price will go up. But if my comparable is superior, like in this case, you see it has 6 bedrooms, so it has 5 bedrooms, right? It has more than my subject property, that comparable. So if it's superior than the subject, then I will subtract. That means my property, my subject property will be worth less. So I will take from this price and I will lower the price for my subject property. If you're confused right now, don't worry, I'm going to give you so many examples, you're going to fly through this. So again, this is the math for the comparative or the comparison method. It's very easy, and you will want to have more questions like this on the exam. Yeah, you will see, you will. Okay, so let's do some questions. So question 5. You have partially completed appraisal report that you need to fill in. The 2,300 square foot subject property has 4 bedrooms. So basically, he said, I have a property that I need to sell. It has 2,300 square foot. It has the 4 bedrooms, and I don't know what price I should list it at, right? So that's where the question is about. The house next door is similar to all the respects, and the number of bedrooms and the square footage that is different. So basically, you have one comparable property that's given to you in the question that you have to compare it to. Now, what kind of comparables do we use? The one that recently sold once. So this one is sold for $321,000. It has 2,200 square foot of square footage, and it has 3 bedrooms. And it says above an 1,800 square foot benchmark. Now, all this benchmark stuff, like all the bullshit stuff, you just have to ignore it. You have to cross it off. It's not an exam. They just put this to confuse people. It's not going to be something you're going to be using. The only thing you need to find in the question is, okay, so we have the square footages. We need to compare them. And that's why it's called comparative method. Bedrooms, compare them, adjust them, right? And then we'll find out the price of the subject property. In the question, they're always going to tell you how much each bedroom, bathroom, square footage, how much it's worth. In real life, nobody's going to give you those numbers, right? But it says that each 100 square foot is worth 5,000, and one bedroom, each bedroom is worth $3,200, right? So if you had that type of information, and you said, look, I'm looking for the price of this. Just kind of have a visual picture of this. Your subject has more square footage than the comparable, has more bedroom than the comparable. Is your subject going to be worth more than 321,000? Yeah, it should, because it has more stuff, right? And if it has more stuff, so we'll take the price of the comparable, okay, and we'll adjust it. We'll adjust it to make it more because subject property has more. So, but what are we adjusting? We're adjusting comparable. So that IS formula, I'm the IS formula, right? Comparable is inferior. So that means you will be adding to the price of the comparable things, so the subject property will be worth more. So I put this information here so you can see it's the subject price that we're working on, but the comparable is what we're using as on a piece of paper because we have to adjust something that's already been sold, okay? So 321. So comparable is inferior, so that means I will be adding values to this number, right? So each 100 square foot is 5,000. How much difference? 2,300, 2,200, so it's 100 square foot difference. So 3,000, so 5,000 will be added to this inferior add, okay? And then another bedroom difference, comparable, again, it's inferior, so you have to add $3,200 of one bedroom to that price, and it will come up to $329,200 as a price for the subject property, right? So basically, I'm playing with the numbers from the comparable, and if my comparable is less than the subject, if it's inferior, then I'm going to be adding to the price of the comparable, and this way, I'll know how much my subject is worth. Some people say, but comparable already sold. Why would we? Because that's the only number we have on a piece of paper to play with, right? We don't have the subject price or anything else, so we do have to adjust the comparable to find out how much the subject will be worth, right? It's not like we're going to be relisting that. We're just playing with those numbers. So the answer in this one is 329.2. That's the price should be for the subject property that you're trying to sell. Let's do one more. The more you do the questions, the better you catch on them. So make sure that you do homework. Question 6, you have a partially completed appraisal report that you need to fill in. The subject property has 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms. Okay, that's your subject. That's the one that you're trying to find the price for. The house next door is similar in all respects for the number of bedrooms and bathrooms. It's sold for $225,500, right? So that's your comparable that has been sold already. Has 3 bedrooms, has 3 bathrooms. So again, your comparable has more or less. right? If you look at the scale, your comparable has less, right? Your subject worth more, it has more bedrooms. So I know already that my subject will be worth more than that, right? And in this case, they're not looking for the math, they're not looking for the actual sale price for the subject, but they're looking for adjustments. Are you gonna adjust it by adding or subtracting? So you need to remember that we're working with a comparable. And that's why here it says the market value of the bedroom will be 4,000, market value of the bathroom is 5,700. This comparable will have to be adjusted. So you see how the question, it talks about the comparable. This comparable will have to be adjusted for the bedroom and bathroom by what? So we're not looking for the subject, but we're looking for the comparable. As your comparable has more or less in value. It has less. And if it has less, that's your IA formula. In theory, you add. So if it has less in value, you're adding. Okay? So if I want to find out how much my subject is worth, I'll take that 225,005 as a price of the comparable. And then I'm going to start adding for each missing bedroom and the bathroom. So I'm going to be adding one bedroom and one bathroom, right? And each bedroom is 4,000, each bathroom is 57. So if I had to look for the price, that's how much my subject property will be worth. But here they're just asking, how would you adjust the comparable? Okay, you would add 4,000 and you would add 57. So the answer should be option number 3. It's not bad. You just have to remember what they're looking for. It's the comparable that we're adjusting, right? Okay, question 7, you have a partially completed appraisal report that you need to fill in. The subject property has 2,000 square foot, has 4 bathrooms. Right? The house next door, which is similar, has 2,100 square foot, 3 bathrooms, just by looking at this. And this one is sold for 326,005. So if I look at this, my comparable has more or less than the square footage. It has more. When it comes to bathroom, it has less. So we'll have to do some pluses and some minuses this time. Okay. So market value of the bathrooms is $2,700, and don't worry about the benchmark again, that stuff, right? Each 100 square foot is worth $5,000. So you just need to know the adjustments for what we have to do in here. And what is the question? This comparable will be adjusted. So comparable is the one that we're adjusting. So I'll pull out the price from the comparable. And because my subject has less and my comparable has more, that formula applies to what? I asked, right? It applies to the comparable. So my comparable, not the subject, has more or less than the subject property. My comparable has more. So that means my comparable is superior when it comes to square footages. And if it's superior, then you are subtracting, right? So that means your subject doesn't have as much. That means it's not going to be worth as much. So how much is my square footage down there? Is 5,000. There's 100 square foot difference in there. So that means my comparable has more, and that means my subject will be less by 5,000, right? So I'll do minus the 5,000, that's the square footage. But my subject, look at this, has 4 bathrooms, and my comparable has 3 bathrooms. We adjust in the comparable. My comparable has more or less. It has less bathrooms. So if it has less bathroom, that means it's inferior. That means you're adding to the subject. So that means your subject will be worth more by adding that extra bathroom in here, right? So because it has less square footage, you minus that out of the price, and because it has more bathroom, you add in that, right? So your subject price will be that, right? 324,200. If you look at this, if you're looking for the price, but they're not looking for the price, they're just looking for the adjustments of the comparable, and the comparable adjusted by minus the 5,000, right? And plus $2,700 for the bathrooms. Hopefully that makes sense. Question 8, same thing. We're looking for the subject, and then we're looking for a comparable. So subject property, how do they phrase it differently? You have partially completed appraisal that you need to fill in. The house next door to the subject property is similar in respect, except the numbers of the bedrooms and the square footage. This 23 square foot comparable sold, right? So that's the comparable price for 250,000, has 4 bedrooms and was adjusted. So it was adjusted. So we always adjust in this stuff by 4,200 and 15,000 for square footage. So comparable has adjusted. So if I do this, and if I look that comparable has to be adjusted by this much and that much, okay, that means my comparable is inferior or superior. Does it have more or less than the subject? My comparable has, if I'm adding, that means it's inferior. That means my subject will have more square footage and more bathrooms. Do you see how that works? Because I'm adding and I'm adding to the comparable. So that means it's inferior and my subject property will have more square footage and more bathrooms. And then they say the market value of the bedroom is 4,200, 100 square foot is 5,000. So it adjusted by plus 4,200. That means it has more bedrooms by how many? By 1 bedroom more. So that means my subject property will have 1 extra bedroom, okay? And then adjusted by $15,000 for square footage. If it's 100 square foot worth 5,000, that means I'm going to be adding how many? I'm going to be adding 3 times more square footage, right? So that's what just happened in here. So I would add the comparable price, and because it's inferior, I would add $15,000 for the square footage. So that means 3 times 500, right? That's your 300 square foot in there, right? And then plus 4,200 for the bedroom. So that means it has 2,600 square foot. How did you get this again? If each 100 square foot is 5,000 and I had to adjust by 15,000, so that's extra 300 square foot. So I did 2,300 plus 300 square foot, that gives me 2,600 square foot, okay? If I did plus 4,200 for the bedroom, that means my subject property has extra 1 bedroom. So 4 plus 1, that gives me 5 bedroom. So that's the information that you have for your subject property. In real life, you don't have to do any of this. Okay, question 9. So which of the following is true when a comparable property is sold subject to a vendor supplied mortgage at an interest rate lower than the current market rate? Now, this question confuses most of the people, right? They don't understand what they're asking it for. But just look at this picture in here. That kind of explains a lot of things in here. So you have a subject property, right, that you trying to buy, and the bank right now offers you on that subject property 10% of interest rate, right? And you said, that's a lot. And then you found one comparable and says, my comparable that I found in here, their mortgage rate that's fixed with that property is only 2%. So you have to look at it and says, the comparable in this question, does it have a better value? It's like comparable having more bedrooms, so more square footage. It's the same idea. But if the comparable has a better rate, that means it has more in value. It has more to offer. So that means your comparable, is that inferior? Is that superior? It's superior because it has more to offer, right? It has more bedroom, more square footage, better rate. It's the same thing, so it has more. So if your comparable has better value, that means your subject property is not going to be worth as much. Good. So if that was inferior, you would add, superior, you would subtract. So in this case, your comparable sale price will be adjusted downwards. Why? Because your comparable has more in value, and your subject property will be worth less because it's not as attractive as the rate of 2%, right? So that's why the subject property will be worth less because the comparable price will be adjusted downwards to reflect the subject property. So now we're going to be talking about the second method that we're going to be using in math for. So that's your cost method. Now, remember what cost stands for? Something that is unique, something that you have nothing to compare to, right? Like a church, like a temple, like the mill, the concrete plant, right? So all the things that is not an MLS, it's not an income producing property, it's not an investment property, it's something just unique, and you need to figure out how much will you sell it for. Now, a lot of times they will ask you an exam, why is this method is not frequently used? So this method is not like comparative method. This is the most inexact approach. It means it's not usable. It's not real. It's the last method on the planet that you're going to be using to find out how much your property is worth. Right? The most usable method, of course, is the comparative method, but this is the least usable one. And if they ask you why, because the cost is not equals value. Right? You never know how much is the cost going to be, right? And how much is the actual true value for this property. So the assumption the cost equals value is not necessarily correct. So what does this mean? Cost equals value. So if the property was at its highest and best use, so there's no better use for this property. Whatever the use is right now for, this is it, right? So that means the cost could be equal value, right? That kind of makes sense, right? Whatever you sell it for, like it's going to be worth. Whatever you appraise it for, it's going to be nice and similar to that price. But then they also want to talk about the construction. Says, look, especially right now when the lumber cost is so high, and people said it's not even worth to build a brand new building because the construction cost to build something is super high, super expensive, and the prices of the houses is not there yet. So I'm not going to make any profit in here unless the lumber goes down, prices of the lumber, or unless the price of the buildings increase, right? So what happens when the construction of the building is greater than the actual how much you can sell it for? Then of course development will stop because they have no profit to make in here. But if the cost to construct is less, so the cost of the labor is cheap and the cost of material is cheap, of course you will see that will increase in new development, and there's so much more new buildings will start coming up in the market because the developers know there's enough profit to make, right? But when it comes to a cost method, then you know that those buildings probably not at its highest and best use, and it's going to be hard to determine the value of the property, right? That's why we don't use this method too often. Okay, we're going to do the question 10. The cost approach of appraisal is not generally used to value what? Now, you know we use this method for the unique properties, right? But in this case, people look at the question, they're like, none of them should be, or one of them maybe, right? Because condominiums, single-family houses sounds like a residential thing to use, isn't it? Vacant lots, that's comparison method, isn't it? But there's an explanation to this. So airport hangars, that's the shop for the airplanes where they fix them, right? So that could be a cost approach, right? That's the only one that could be, in our opinion, that's easy to recognize, but they ask you which one is not one of them. So that means we can use all of them for the cost approach except one. And this is where you have to think, okay? Single-family houses could be unique properties. Could be a house in the middle of nowhere that looks like a little, I don't know, princess house or something, like something completely unique and has nothing to compare it to. Could be, or Michael Jackson's house, that could be one of them, right? That could be used for the cost approach because you can't compare Michael Jackson's house to any other houses, right? It's a bit different, right? Condominiums could be the same thing, right? It could be some famous people that you cannot really use that for anybody else, but the vacant lot is the only one you can never ever use for the cost approach, right? Why not? Because since vacant lot has no improvements, then the cost approach cannot be used for the vacant lot. So you cannot put if it's a vacant lot, that means it has no building. That means we cannot do the math on this method, right? In order for you to figure out the cost method, you need to have something on top of the land because you will take that something, right? And then you will take depreciation from that building or whatever that's on it, and then you would add the land to this to figure out how much the property is worth. But the vacant lot has nothing, there's no improvements on top of it, there's no building on it, so you can't really use the cost method in this case. Tricky question. So this is the formula you're going to be using for your cost method. So formula talk, it's very basic, it's easy, you'll remember this because we'll do a lot of math on this. So the cost of improvements, it's not just the building by itself, but anything on top of that land. Remember how in this question, vacant land could not be used for the cost approach? Why not? Because it has nothing to do math on, right? There's no calculation to do that. So basically the cost of improvements, it could be the materials, it could be the labor, it could be whatever that goes on top of that land that could be used for depreciation, right? So that's what we're going to be using. A lot of times in the question, they will not give you that cost of the improvements, but they say that the house is 3,000 square foot and they charge $10 per square foot, right? So that's how you figure out the cost of improvements. You will take the square footage, you will tell you how much they charge for that square foot, right? And then it will tell you that 30,000, that will be the cost of the improvements, right? The cost of the building, right? And then you will minus depreciation, and then you would add the land value. Now, why is the land is right here? Because the land will never depreciate. For the exams, the land will never depreciate. On the exam, sometimes equal land value is site value. So site value, land value means exactly the same, right? So you will take that, your improvements minus depreciation plus the land, and that will show you the market value of the property, or how much you should market it for. So before we get to the math, we're going to talk about different costs of improvements. And because on exams, sometimes instead of just giving you the information, they'll say the new cost is, the current cost is $10 per square foot, but the historic cost was $3 per square foot. So what they're trying to say that in the question, if they tell you that there's two different costs and you have to figure out which one to use, which one do you think you'll use? If I say, the guy who charged me 20 years ago, he charged me $3, and now you tell me that he charged me $10. Which one would you use? Of course, not the historic cost. Historic is what you paid long time ago, right? So never use the old cost. Always use what it costs right now, the current cost. So if they cost right now $10 per square foot, then you use this. You don't use the historic cost, right? So those two that you have to, it makes sense. Put the star next to reproduction, put the star next to replacement cost. On the exam, a lot of times they'll ask you just for a definition for those two. Like you never know which one is yours, but they are so simple. And they say, look, what is the reproduction cost? What is that? Reproduction cost is when you want to reproduce something, right? So if it's a church, kind of want to do a replica of it, right? You don't want to put some brand new drywalls in there or something, right? So for the exam, if I want to talk about reproduction, then you think of the word replica. I replicate things, right? Reproduction. Replacement cost. So what am I replacing things with? If you ask me, let's put some plaster. I like plaster, clay instead of drywalls. And I said, what are you talking about? Who uses clay these days, right? If I'm going to replace something, I'm going to replace it with the modern equivalent stuff. So think of the replacement. I'm going to replace it with modern stuff. Nobody uses clay. We're going to put a drywall. Just the way it works, right? So that's how I want you to remember those two things. Okay, question 11. The question is about reproduction cost, right? So what keyword would you look for? I'm not going to read all the options. You tell me. Which one do you like? Is that the historic cost, the current cost, the original cost, or is that the current cost of the construction that produces exact replica, right? So hopefully you found that replica keyword, and that's what you're looking for. Okay, so there's two different methods of depreciations that you have to know. Age life methods and the breakdown methods. And they will question you on them. They like this stuff. They want to make sure that you understand them both. So the age life method, this is a new method. We just added it on the exams. And this is the method that talks about depreciation and says, how would you depreciate the building, right? So the building itself that deteriorates, right? Something that goes down in value at some point. How would you take that depreciation out of that building, right? And they want you to know, because it's called the age life method, right? This is where they're going to give you different type of ages in here. They'll give you the actual age and they'll give you the effective age, right? In those type of questions, I don't have an example here for you in this slides or in this video, but when you do the homework, we'll add some of those questions for you just for practice. But just know the actual age of the building, maybe it's 15 years old. But because you've done a major renovation and you change things up around, when that appraiser came to look at your property, he said, you know what? Based on all the things that you've done to the building, the effective age changed to 10 years. So now the building looks like it's 10-year-old building, not 15-year-old building. And now they're going to be using this life age method to find out how much depreciation. What is the reason for? So they don't evaluate, so they don't overcharge you on depreciation. They don't charge you more for depreciation, right? So the formula goes like this. You take the effective age, not the actual age. You forget about the actual age in those type of questions. You use the effective age because you've done some things to that building, right? You take 10 years, and then you divide it by the economic life. So what is economic life? It's basically they tell you how much they think the building is going to last for, right? So life of the building expectancy is 50, and the effective age is 10. So you take 10 divided by 50, that gives you 20% of depreciation, right? So but if I had the actual age in there, 15 divided by 50, that would give me 30% depreciation, right? So I would have to minus depreciation way more. But because I improved my building, from now on, I'm not using the actual age, I'm using the effective age. So for the exam, just remember, forget about the actual age. It's about the new age, right? And then you divide it by the economic life, it gives you your percentage. So now you depreciate your building by 20%, right? Sometimes they'll ask you just for this by itself, and that's it, and that will be your question, right? Remember that the effective age does not equals actual age. It's two different things, right? It reflects the appraiser's estimate of the subject condition relative to market norms, right? So that's exactly what that is. So he estimates saying that's, because of all the renovation, it's now 10 years old instead of 15. So then what you do, you take, let's say the building is 500,000, right? You take 10 by 20%, so minus 100,000 depreciation. Now the building is only worth 400,000. So if I wanted to know how much the building is worth based on this age life method, then I would find this depreciation based on the effective age. Okay, then I would minus it out of the replacement cost, out of the cost of the building, how much I think it's supposed to be worth, right? And then it will give me the actual value, what's the market value of this property is worth. Now the breakdown method, now this is the method they focus the most, right? Because they want to make sure that you understand the difference between the curable and incurable, the difference between the physical and functional depreciations. So this is where you look at the building and says, look, some depreciation will be physical. Now what is physical? Physical is something that is lost in market value caused by the physical wear and tear. So basically something that is not working, it's physically broken, and it doesn't do the job. That's what that is, right? So sometimes it's just a wear and tear, but it's basically saying it's not doing what it's supposed to do, right? And then we have functional. Functional, that means that depreciation still works, it still does the job, but it's ugly, it's old. Who has purple carpets these days, right? If you do, that could be, from 1980s, or how we have the pink kitchens, and sometimes you go in and they have the green bath and all the things. So those kind of things that's from like 80s and 70s, right? It still works. It still can take the bath, right? It's just not that pretty. So it's still functional. So functional means it still works, but it's outmoded. It's outdated. It's old. It's ugly. And it should be replaced. And then each of those physical and functional, it could be curable and it could be incurable, right? Curable is something that it makes sense to fix. Incurable, just leave it as is. There's no point of you putting money into this because it's not going to bring up the value of the property anymore. So for the exam, incurable, think of it as something that is structural. Keep it simple. You don't have to think and put common sense in here, but if it's something structural, something to do with the foundation. So if I say there's a crack in the foundation, that's a structural problem, and that will be incurable. Okay? So something to do with the foundation of the building, with the structure of the building, even the floor plan of the building. That's incurable for the exam purposes, because real life, we do changes to everything. So if I say to you, the house has narrow hallways, what type of depreciation do you think that is? A narrow hallway. First, ask yourself the question, does it work or it does not work? Okay, it's narrow, but you can still walk through them. Okay, so it's still functional, right? But is that curable or incurable? Right? If it's something to do with the floor plan, if it has something to do with the foundation of the structure of the building, it becomes incurable. So I put those floor plan and narrow hallways for you as a functional incurable. Right? It doesn't work. Sorry, it works, but it's not. There's no point of putting money into this. Just leave as is. Right? So if it's old kind of a plan that you walk in the house and the first thing you see is the bathroom, right? So it's just the way it's been built, and there's no point of you changing it. So that's what they're trying to say, functional. Right? What if I say to you? What if I say, let me give you another example? Actually, let me show you the question, and then that will be your example. So question 12, the loss in value caused by the outmoded and inadequate design in the building. So what are they saying in here? So the loss of value caused by the outmoded. Outmoded is outdated. If they say the word outdated, what are they referring to? They're referring to the functional depreciation, because it is, as I said, purple carpets, green bathtub, maybe not, something you want to still keep, but it still works, right? Okay, how about this one? Which of the following is a functional and curable? So they're looking for functional and curable, something that works, and it's nothing to do with the structure of the building, right? So old wallpaper in the master bedroom, that's an A, and B, it says brass faucet in the bathroom. So brass faucet in the bathroom, that makes sense. That's definitely functional and it's definitely curable, right? I mean, I love brass. Brass right now isn't it like in style now? But anyway, so that's supposed to be as outdated kind of thing, right? Functional and curable, but that is usable. But option A, what would you say about this one? The old wallpaper in here, what would you say? And if you go back on your slides, okay, you will see that they put the paint and the wallpaper as a physical, okay? Because for them, it's a wear and tear, right? So something that is, if it's, sometimes they even say on the exam, peeling wallpaper, that makes more sense because it's peeling, right? But for them, if something that is wrong with paint or the wallpaper, that becomes physical, but of course it's curable because you can definitely fix that up, right? So for that reason, you would only choose the B option as the functional and curable, because wallpaper is going to be what? It's going to be physical curable. Good job. So yeah, only option B. So that's tricky. That's tricky. Next one, question 14. In using the cost method of appraisal, the major difficulty is experienced in calculating which method. So if I go back on this slide in here, and if I tell you, if you buy the house, which one is the worst depreciation in here out of all of them, which one is the worst one? First of all, is that physical or functional? Which one is worse? Definitely physical, because it doesn't work. It doesn't do the job. It needs to be replaced, right? That's how they look at the physical one. And between the curable and incurable, which one is the worst? So if the house has a sloping floors, right? If it has a crack in the foundation, they say, look, you bought it, just keep it as is, right? There's no point of fixing the foundation. It's better to rebuild it at some point, right? So the physical, incurable, it's the worst out of all of them. So if they give you the question asking you what is the major difficulty to find, to calculate things, it's definitely going to be the worst depreciation out of all of them, which is incurable and physical. And that is the answer they give you on the exam. They say the allowance for incurable physical depreciation is more difficult to estimate. The cause of the difficulty lies in determining the economic life of the building. So you just don't know how long it's going to last for that building, right? That's sloping floors. That's a major problem. Question 15, in appraisal, the outdated feature that can be corrected economically is best known as what? So if it's outdated, outmoded, right, something that is functional, that can be corrected economically, so that means it could be fixed. How do you call it? Functional and curable. Good job. Okay, so let's do a little bit of math. Now this is where we get to that easy math. You're gonna like these questions, okay? So you have to remember what the cost of improvements. It could be anything. It could be the planning, design, constructions, building costs, right? If it's not given to you, they will tell you the square footage and how much they charge per square foot, and that's how you find the cost of improvements. Then what do? Then you're gonna minus depreciation, and the question don't tell you how much depreciation comes from that building or from whatever you're calculating, and only then you would add the site value. Site value, that's your land, right? And then it will tell you how much the property should be worth. So let's do question 16. We have 3 questions to work on. Question 16. You are assigned to task the appraisal in a small apartment building. The current construction cost is $101 per square foot. The total area of the building is 10,000 square foot, and the land value is estimated to be 300,000. And the gross potential rent from the building is estimated to be 120,000. The building was built 4 years ago and is deemed to have depreciated 10% at this time. It has been determined that the reasonable capitalization rate is 11%. Now, they give you way more information in here than you actually need to use. And this is exactly what they do in the exam. They'll give you a lot of random numbers, right? They'll give you a lot of extra things in there, but you have to be focused and you have to say, okay, what are they looking for? And this is what you focus on. What method do they want me to look at? And if they say using the cost method, okay, this formula should be in your mind. So if I say using the cost method and your mind says, okay, I need to find the cost of improvements, okay? I have to find depreciation in the question, and I have to have the land, right, to see how much the land is worth. So 3 things I have to have. I put the formula there for you, okay? So how do we find the cost of improvements in this question? It is not telling you how much, you have to figure that out. How do we figure out? You look at the cost, right? Square footage of the building, and then you look how much they charge per square foot. So in this case, I see that they have 10,000 square foot, and they charge $101 per square foot. So this is how I can find how much the building worth, right? How much is the cost of the building? So 1,110,000. If you want to do math, just write it down. Okay, next one. What do I need? So I've done the cost of the improvements. Now I need to find depreciation. Do I have a depreciation in the question in here? What does it say that? It says deemed to have depreciated by 10% in this time. So if it's 10%, then what do? You minus that out of the building cost. So second one, you're going to do minus 10% depreciation. So you're going to do 1,010,000, right? And then you do minus the 10% on the calculator equals, it will come up to 909,000. Okay, are we done? No, we're not, because we still have to add the land value. How much is the land value in this question? Do they say site value or the land value? What are they using here? Okay, they say they're using the land value is estimated to be 300,000. So they tell you the land is 300,000. What do? You add the 300,000 to this, and it will come up to the market value of the building is 1,209,000, right? So that will be the answer for the first one. Is that easy math? Yes or no? You're supposed to love this stuff. This is easy. This is the best math you can have. Next one. But don't get tricked by them, okay? Fred Jones wants to determine the market value of his property. Unfortunately, he lives in a separately inhabited region where there is no recently sold similar properties. However, he does know that the replacement cost, which is new, at his 50 square foot house is 3850 square foot. The site value estimated using the comparative method of appraisal is 37,500. So then it says Mr. Jones has not been taking adequate care of the house and it has depreciated in value. There has been 12,200 of curable physical depreciation. In addition to the bathroom and kitchen fixtures are outdated, the replacement cost is $6,300 based on the information about what is the market value of Mr. Jones' property. Now, the reason I read so fast because we don't need to read all of it. We don't need to go through the question. The only thing I want you to do is scan through the question, look for what you're looking for, right? So in this question, what do we see in here? We see that they're referring to, right? They have the site value. They gives us the square footage and how much they charge per square foot, and then they give me all different type of depreciation in the question in here. So to me, that's enough information to fill in this formula, right? So how do you find the cost of improvements? You're going to take the square footage of the property times how much they charge per square foot. So here they only give you two numbers, so there's no historic cost, not current cost. It just gives you two numbers, so that's easy. So you're going to take that 1350 times it by 3850. Okay, gives you 51,975. What is this? That's your building cost, right? That's the cost of the improvements. Next, what do? Do you have a depreciation in this question? Usually depreciation will be given to you on exam as a percentage, like a previous question. That was easy. But in this question, they give it to you as, it's been depreciated by 12,002 and by $6,300. It doesn't matter what type they're telling you. It doesn't matter if it's physical, curable. It doesn't matter. Minus them all. Keep it simple. So if it says, yes, this is the depreciations, minus them. So that will be two minuses in here. So you're going to do minus 12,200, minus 6,300. And that will give you the depreciation, right, of 33,475. So you take this 51,975 minus this, and that tells you that so far we have 33,475. Are we done yet? No, because now we have to find the land. How much is the land in this question? Do we have a land in here? Yes, we do. And how did they say about the land? They said the site value. You see how they call it site value? Site value is the same thing as the land value, right? Estimated to be 37.5. So you would add that to everything else, right? So that through 33,475 plus 37.5, and that shows you that the property value will be 70,975. It's an easy math. I wish we had more questions like this, right? Hopefully you start to see that too. One more. Okay, you have been assigned to task. So the task of appraising the Oak Park Community Center in Dixon, BC. The land on which the center is built was purchased 8 years ago at the cost of $18,000. Similar lots today sell for $28,000. And the center is 4,000 square foot structure. It was originally built at a cost of 38,000 square foot, right? And the replacement cost, which is new today, will be 57. Do you see what they're doing here? They're giving you the old historic cost and they're giving you the new cost. Old, new, right? And they also tell you that they purchased 8 years ago for $18,000 and today it's worth 28. So they give you old numbers and new numbers, and it's your job to notice that. Estimated depreciation factor would be 30%. So that's kind of a common depreciation thing. Using the cost method of appraisal, the correct estimate of the market value. So the same cost method. If you say cost method, that formula should just jump it to cost of the improvements minus depreciation plus the land. So let's start with the first cost of the improvements. What numbers would you use for the cost of the improvements? You need the square footage and you need to know how much they charge per square foot. So would you use 4,000 and you would times it by what? Would you times it by 38,000 or 57? It's smart. Tell me that it's 57, right? So you forget about the old cost. Nobody cares how much you used to pay, okay? It's how much you charge right now. So 4,000 times the 57 gives you 228,000, okay? Step one is done. Minus depreciation. How much was depreciation here? Was 30%. So minus 30% out of that 228,000 gives you 159,600 so far. And now we have to add the land value. So what would you use for the land value? Would that be 18,000 or would that be 28,000? You purchased it 18 years ago or 8 years ago for 18,000. Does it matter? Who cares, right? So cross it off, so you're only going to use what it's cost right now, current cost. So plus 28,000 for the land, and that gives you 187.6, and that should be the answer. Woohoo! We'll finish this chapter. Isn't that nice? I know I speak fast. You can slow me down maybe, or you can watch Melanie's videos. Always welcome. She explains it a bit slower and in more details, but I like to fly through this stuff because I find sometimes the information, the more I tell you, the more you forget. So I like to stick to the point. Okay? So this math was really good, and I hope you're going to have more of those math questions in the exam. Trust me on that because that will save you butt. So we'll finish with this chapter. We're going to continue with the income method in the next video.